On part 1 of our podcast, we talked about a mysterious and tragic murder. A well-liked repairman in a small town was abducted and subsequently gunned down. The main information that we had to go on was what was told to us in the Unsolved Mysteries segment and a few newspaper articles. However, we have now been sent most of the police files from the Claremont County Sheriff's Office. It did help fill in some holes and gave us some additional information, but it also left us with even more questions. Let's talk again about Permon Gilbert. To quickly sum up part 1, Permon Gilbert was a well-liked appliance repairman who lived in Hamersville, Ohio. In May of 1982, he would leave on Saturday morning to run some errands and perform some service calls, and told his wife that he would be back by 3 p.m. Permon never returned home that day, so early the next morning his wife would report him missing. On the same day that he was reported missing, his body would be found naked and discarded in a ditch just 7 miles from his home. He had been beaten and also had 3 bullet wounds. The next day his van would be found over 20 miles away with no signs of violence inside. The police had 3 major theories that they worked on. The first one involved Permon's brother Vernon. He had been required to testify before a grand jury just 2 months before his brother's murder. Permon was the one who picked him up and waited at the courthouse during his closed-door testimony. Permon would tell his family that he felt like he was being followed that day. Was Permon's murder to punish his brother or to perhaps try to lure Vernon back for the funeral? The second theory was Permon Gilbert being repeatedly asked to run drugs in and out of Brown County. Others made offers to rent his plane so that they could traffic drugs. By his family accounts, Permon had always refused the offers. According to the Unsolved Mysteries segment, Permon even threatened to tell the police if the request didn't stop. Did that lead to his murder? The third theory was, given that Permon Gilbert's job involved going in and out of hundreds of homes, could he have been involved in an affair? Friends and family didn't think that he was the type, and there was no concrete evidence of any infidelity. But could the reason that Permon was found naked point to a possible crime of passion? Well, it is hard to take 150 plus pages of a police file and turn it into an unfolding story, as I usually do with these podcasts. I already laid out the events and the main theories in part 1, so I thought that the best way to go about this in part 2 was to just take the most noteworthy things that we discovered and share them with you by category. I feel that releasing even more information than has been out there for the last 44 years can only help in this case. Bear in mind that the vast majority of the police file was readable. Some of it was redacted. In fact, a lot of the actual names were, but in some instances, you can pretty much figure out who. For example, Permon and Joanne Gilbert's names were actually redacted, but if you read the rest of what is written in context, you know who they are talking about. However, in some instances, we don't know who they are talking about, which of course led us to even more questions. To clarify for the podcast, I will just say the word blank when reading from the police file when the name has been redacted and we aren't relatively certain who they are talking about. Now my friend Clint, who has been helping me with the research on this case, will join me as we go through what we found in the police file. Welcome again, Clint.
Thanks, Heather. I'm glad to be here.
We've had quite a time going through this police file and all the redactions, haven't we?
Yeah, it's a lot to uncover.
Okay, first we're going to talk about the time leading up to and the Friday before he disappeared, and I'll just give some accounts of, what Permon's life was like in that upcoming day. Permon's brother, Don Gilbert, spent some time with him on Friday night. He said they went to Blank's house to look at a truck that Don wanted to buy, which he later did. He said they had a few beers and that Permon was in his usual good frame of mind. He left there just before dark. Permon's daughter said the night before he went missing, she was in the garage with her dad and Blank working on her car, sanding it down to be painted. She said that her dad was in his usual good humor. He stayed with them until early in the morning and then went in to take a shower. Then Detective Gary Wise, talked to Blank, who works at the Bruce Shant Pontiac Buick dealership in Bethel, and he said he was at Permon's house Friday night. He does all of Permon's body work, and he told Gary that Permon left the shop at 2 a.m. and said he was going to take a shower and go to bed. And also, not long before he was murdered, Permon talked to his brother-in-law, Harold. The brother-in-law said the last time Permon visited him, he was under a lot of stress or some kind of pressure. He had questioned him, and Permon replied, "The less you know, the better off you are, Harold." He thought it was something about blank, but wasn't sure. So you have any thoughts about those accounts?
So with the Harold, I think if that was the brother-in-law, I think there's a chance they were discussing maybe a feud or an incident that happened in the family that has really no relation to any of this. So when I first read it, I thought maybe if it's the same Harold, they're discussing maybe a familial matter.
Yeah, because there was reference to something about the family, but we just chose to not, include
doesn't
it.
Matter.
But yeah, it could have been it could have been anything really that he was stressed about.
Yes, so like what we know about him the night before he that Saturday or that Friday night, he is just a very busy person. He looks like he stays very active, with Dawn, his sibling, but also this man whose name was redacted, who came over and stayed until about 2 a.m. For someone who's in his 40s and has to work on a Saturday, that's just very late to me.
Oh, yeah. I was surprised at 2 a.m., yeah.
Yeah.
So this is interesting, I thought. Someone in Bethel called and advised that on Saturday, before they found Permon's body, that he saw Permon's van travel north on South Charity, past his residence, and turn west on Cherry Street. He said that there was only one subject in his van, and it was a man with blonde hair and a full beard. He didn't call it in until July 5th, and seemed to be upset that he'd never called them before this. And then someone else, this was kind of random, but asked if Permon was taken to a house in Felicity, beaten, shot, and then dumped. The police asked them why he would think Felicity, and he answered because he was very familiar with Felicity and that there were a lot of bad people there and the closeness to where the body was found to Felicity.
Yeah, you hit it when you said random, because there's a lot of random stuff in this file that may or may not have anything to do with this murder.
Yeah, so we actually left some stuff out that we didn't think was related and tried to keep, what we thought was somewhat relevant or interesting anyway.
Yeah, but eyewitness accounts, those are, really difficult to take at truth.
Yeah. And, it was a big van. I'm sure there were, other ones similar.
Yeah.
And it didn't have any kind of writing as far, we have pictures of it now, so there was no writing on it. Okay, so the next category was about the crime scene and the body. One thing that was interesting is Permon's body had gray paint chips on it. And the coroner also said that at one point he felt that Permon was either laying on something or something was laying on him. And there was a previous wound on his leg, a little bit of the autopsy that we saw. But when his wife reported him missing, she did mention a past leg injury, so we think it was connected to that. So they also found several beer cans around the area of his body, which was interesting. And his body was fairly visible, but there was a thorn bush above it that somebody pushed down, so trying to somewhat hide the body. And the 15-year-old who discovered Permon's body was named Russell Hartley. And there was a James Fletcher who lived on Swope Road. He said the only vehicle that he could remember on that road most of the day was a red Jeep, which drove east on Swope Road, then returned a short time later, and it had 2 male subjects in it. And this was reportedly seen about 3 hours before Permon's body was discovered in the same area. So thoughts about that, Clint?
Yeah, there's a lot to unwind here. So we're going to start off, you mentioned the autopsy, that he had gray paint chips. We had just spoke about the daughter's car that he was working on the night before, but we know that he took a shower around 2 a.m. that morning. So you would think if those paint chips were for his daughter's car, that wouldn't be on his body.
Yeah,
so
unless it was some kind of paint spray, like faint. But yeah, it was strange.
So I would like to know what color her car was at that time, but we just don't know that information. But when Mr. Fletcher and Russell were spoken to the day that his body was found, that's when they gave their recollection of the eyewitness that they saw in that van. Mr. Fletcher did. Mm-hmm. So normally I don't believe eyewitness accounts very much, but I think this one, there's maybe something to it, because he wasn't going 2 months later and then saying, hey, I think I saw someone that day. Like, he was actually saying it at the crime scene.
Yeah, I know. I'd never heard about two guys in a red Jeep. That was something new, for sure.
Yeah, I think on Robin Waters' podcast, he does mention it somewhere where there was a scanner where something had been reported about 2 men in a van, but that's the only other place I had heard.
Yeah. Okay.
But when we're talking about the beer cans, one thing from the images that we were able to figure out were the beer that was used, the brand was a generic brand from the 1982s. So whoever was drinking beer, we could just assume they were cheap.
Yeah, and we know that Permon was a beer drinker. I don't know whether it would have been in the van, but I wonder if they did test, for fingerprints on the beer cans.
I would hope so, but I really don't think so.
And nowadays it would be DNA for the,
Yeah.
So, okay, now about the van, just some random things. Before the van was found at 11 p.m. on Saturday night, someone said that Permon was seen in the Bethel area with a female subject named only blank and 2 males. One male's last name is blank, and both subjects had been released from prison. The caller said that this person was supposed to be staying at their grandfather's residence on Starling Road out of Bethel. And they also said the truck or van could possibly be on Starling Road on a gravel lane at the bottom of the hill. And there were a few very interesting sightings of this van before it was found abandoned. Patrolman Widmore from Bethel said that he saw Permon's van in his village earlier the day he went missing, and there was a man and woman inside, and they mentioned both of them, but they're both redacted. And then the Bethel Fire Department Chief Bob Hawk said someone observed Permon's van in the area of Swope Road on Sunday where he was found, and a white female was driving, and they thought it was unusual that somebody else would be driving it. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, we have more eyewitness accounts. One of them being the fire department chief, and even a patrolman too there. So I think there's some weight to what they saw. Yeah.
And they knew his van. They just were surprised that they didn't see him driving it. So
right.
So when the van was found on Ebenezer Road, the doors were locked, but the back door was unlocked. And we've got some of the photos, and you can see Permon's watch was hanging on the gear shift. The air conditioner was on high, and there were no signs of violence inside. And there were several fingerprints found inside and outside the van. Now, when Joanne reported her husband missing, she said that he was wearing a watch and a Masonic ring. The watch was clearly visible on the gear shift, but there's no mention of Permon's Masonic ring being found on his body, nor is it mentioned that it is missing when they talk about the Masonic wallet and belt buckle being missing. So what happened to this ring, and is it still missing?
Yeah, that's something I would like to know too. One thing I was going to add about the van that we probably need to insert here is that there were actually two. So in Perm's van, he had a trash can, which I thought was unusual. Have you ever seen that before?
Oh, yeah, and it was a full trash can they took a picture of.
Yeah, and he had 2 beverages in there. And we talked about the beer cans and whether the beer cans have been tested, but I would really like to know if they kept those two beverages. It was from, and I'm not going to name the chain restaurant, but it was a chain restaurant that's local to the area. And in his trash can, he, it could have been the night before, it could have been the day, but we know he was a very, very clean person. So I really don't see him keeping that in a van more than 24 hours. But who knows?
Yeah. And another thing that hasn't really been mentioned, but Permon's sunglasses were found. They looked like they were on maybe the running board of the van or the floor.
That's what I thought.
And they mentioned that they returned the watch and sunglasses back to the family, and they still did not mention the ring.
Yeah.
So I wonder, I know Unsolved Mysteries sometimes will hold out information. I wonder if the ring, the belt buckle, and the wallet are all three missing, but they just didn't mention the ring. So they know if they've got a good tip.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I also wonder with those rings, how unique are they? Being that they're Masonic, would they all be the same? I mean, how would you know it was specific to him unless it had an engraving on it?
We also were sent a picture of Permon, and it's interesting because he's got a camera up to his face. But you can see the Masonic belt buckle, and I assume that's why it's in the police file. So you can't see Permon's face, but you can see the belt buckle.
Yeah, it was like a bit of an artistic picture, like it was kind of like a bit haunting looking at it now, but at first when I saw it, I was like, man, why would they include this? There's got to be better photos, but then I realized the belt buckle. But from that, I think you can see he probably has a sense of humor.
Yeah, it's a picture, taking a picture of someone, taking a picture of you.
Yeah.
So as far as the funeral, police attended the funeral, and they wrote down the license plate of every car that attended. So the police report contains 149 license plate numbers. So, and there was nothing unusual noticed at the gravesite, but a yellow TC Auto pulled into the graveyard and out. And some flowers were sent to the funeral from California. And, I mean, that's where Vernon was living at the time, but we're not positive it was from him. And I actually talked to someone from the area who attended the funeral. Now, he couldn't really remember if Vernon was there or not, but when he heard that Vernon might show up, he decided to bring his gun to the funeral. And he even told police that he had it. So, I mean, people were on high alert for this.
And this has occurred to me, too. I think I think since it was the flowers were sent actually from Beverly Hills, and we know from another article that that's where Vernon was living, was in Beverly Hills. I had wondered if, as soon as maybe he learned about his brother's death, he had maybe not planned on going to the services, and maybe he sent the flowers. And another thing would be, what if he sent the flowers as if he wasn't attending, but then actually attended?
Yeah, I'm not so sure that Vernon was not at that funeral. But
I'm
because
not there.
Joe, I mean, of course he's going to avoid Joanne. He doesn't want to have to deal with her. But so there's a few mentions in the police file of someone flying in the day of the funeral in the morning and flying out that night. Well, that would make sense if it were Vernon. Of course, it was redacted. Yeah. And then they said, Wise made him aware Vernon was to fly in on Tuesday and is being smuggled in by the family to hide him from the mafia. And the funeral director said somebody called the funeral home, a male, and wanted to know if the services for Permon were over with and what graveyard they were going to, and he would not ID himself.
And we know that the sheriff in Claremont County at the time, his source was the U.S. Customs. He was actually talking to a U.S. Customs agent to confirm that this person had actually boarded the flight.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And which, to me, makes me think it's Vern, because Vern was already involved in some federal issues prior to that.
I mean, according to Unsolved Mysteries, Permon and Vernon were close, so I'm sure it was, especially if he thought it had anything to do with something he was involved in, he would want to be there. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's a hard. I'd like to know too, but I'm like you on that. I had always thought that he did not attend the funeral, and after reading the police report, it looks like he possibly did.
Yeah.
That maybe he just sat in the back, and like you said, Joanne would not have been the person that he needed to be around at that time. So I can see the family maybe keeping that secret and hiding it.
I'm sure Joanne was just beside herself and wasn't paying attention to who was even there.
Yeah, especially with 500 people.
Yeah. So this next categories are just people talking and some rumors. The co-owner, someone co-owned Permon's plane with him, which we only recently realized. But there's no mention anywhere of who that person is. Just that he lives in Hamersville. So he mentioned that someone told him Permon was dating a girl in Maysville, Kentucky. And then a man who lived on State Road 125 knew Permon for several years and worked with him at GE. He had knowledge that Permon was seriously dating blank and had met her through service calls. About 1 year before his murder, Permon had broken off his dating with blank. Apparently, blank did not want the relationship to end and had left notes on his truck, and blank was seen once driving past the residence, the date unknown.
Yeah, so the detectives actually were in full detective mode at the funeral home, which I think is very bizarre. They were interviewing family, and I that still to me does not make a lot of sense. I don't know if they would do that now. But when they interviewed this half owner of the plane, that was still, I don't know if it was the viewing or if that was the day of the funeral, but it was just within a couple days after his death that he actually said that.
Yeah, wow. And we also learned that Permon's CB handle was Flyboy. That was put in there. And it talks about the reason that blank was using Permon's strip was because the heat was getting too much at the airport and he was being watched. Well, this was interesting because it shows that Permon apparently did let people use the strip in certain situations anyway.
Yeah, and I feel like here this is maybe Joanne. I think we talked about this, that this could be Joanne's account of what happened just because the word heat. Do you still agree with that, or did you change your mind?
I mean, yeah, I could see in some of the verbiage that she's used, I could see that. So, okay, the next category is just some possible suspects or random tips that were called in. And they were talking again about blank was believed to be in this area on 521. They made a check at Greater Cincinnati Airport. He did board the flight in LA and got in Cincinnati and was scheduled to leave on 526. I'm not sure if all of these are talking about Vernon. I feel like there's like someone else that we're talking about too.
I agree. I feel like they may be talking about the person that Vernon was testifying against.
Yeah. And they do actually say in the police report the initials are JG. So. And police went to interview a woman who lived on State Road 133 Felicity. They were told that Permon may have been dating her. And they went there, and the neighbors said that she took her daughter to the doctor and she was not home. So I don't know if they met up with her later. Someone phoned in about a man who came into the Bluebeard Disco in Felicity, and he was bruised up and had a black eye. But someone saw him on May 21st before the murder, and he was not injured then. And as far as the airstrip again, Brown County Sheriff Deputy Joe Gillian said that Permon was allowing blank to use his airstrip, and after Permon discovered blank was flying in large amounts of marijuana, Permon ordered him off the property. Yeah,
so I was told through the Facebook page by someone that lives in the area, and I lived in the area back then, that in the early 1980s, that there was just a lot of corruption in Ohio and in Kentucky, and I think that's really just typical of any small town in America. I don't think it's just limited to...
Oh, yes.
But yeah, I was told that even judges were involved in the drug trafficking scene.
Wow. Okay, some more tips. Dispatch received a call on June 11th from blank. She said her husband had returned home and stated to her that he'd wounded or killed a man in Adams County. and told her that if she told, that he would kill her. Sergeant Cooper received information that the Blanks of Hamersville were involved in the killing of Permon. The investigation shows that there were no problems between him and them, and the only connection is that Blank wanted to use Permon's airstrip and was denied permission.
And here we think we know the last name, and we're not going to mention it.
Yeah.
But here I feel pretty confident I know who they're talking about.
Yeah. And then someone's father stated the husband is a truck driver and told him that he was getting suspicious of his wife and was following her around wherever she went. Blank said Blank told him that he thought the motive for the murder would probably be a jealous husband. And they also interviewed someone from H&H Bar in reference to two males in his bar talking about killing Permon, but then the owner denied hearing this conversation. Now here's another mention, and I don't know if this has anything to do, this is really kind of getting out there, but Leo Rolfs from the Criminal Investigation Division of the IRS phoned police. He talked about someone who operated a store known as Blank, involved in the sale of exotic and expensive toys of many Hollywood stars. Also associated is Blank, who owned Hamilton Motor Car Company, which specializes in the importation of expensive cars and vehicles that had title problems and were also lost and destroyed for the purpose of insurance fraud. Also on 5/26, Rolf informed them that they have a very reliable informant who is a businessman around Lunken Airport involved with airplanes. The informant told him that Blank was in town on Friday, May 21st. The informant has had business deals with Blank and liked him, but probably had not direct dealings with Blank on Friday. And then Morton of the U.S. Customs informed them that Blank was involved in bank and insurance fraud and the destruction and recovery of stolen exotic foreign vehicles, was a very heavy cocaine user and seller, and was apparently strung out on cocaine use and having great difficulty. Blank is an articulate con man who has made over $1.5 million on con jobs involving kiting checks and various other schemes. He has convictions in Cincinnati and is presently under indictment for customs fraud and other allied offenses in L.A., presently on bond. These changes, Blank, and it is the belief of Blank as well as his informant that if one was in town and seen, that the other one was also in town. I don't know that it has anything to do with his murder.
I don't either, because I keep going back to the condition of how he was found, and we're looking here at the expensive Hollywood vehicles that this family owned and the fraud. But even if this was some type of retribution, why would they have followed Perm around on that day through his house calls? And why would they have stripped him? That doesn't make sense. Yeah.
Police were driving around the area where the van was found. On the way out of 52 westbound, leaving the area, they pointed out the direction where Blank lived in a trailer park behind a bowling alley in the West Corporation of Aberdeen, and pointed out the approximate location of Blank, which would have been the last two calls that Permon made prior to his appearance at Clyde's supermarket, which was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think we're getting warmer.
Yeah. So now this was a really compelling story, but at the end, it just kind of fell apart. But on December 7th, a subject came forward and said that he saw Permon at the Clyde supermarket parking lot in Maysville on or about May 22nd. He said that he saw Permon come out of Clyde's carrying a small brown paper bag, and he paid attention to him for some reason. He didn't say exactly why, and we couldn't get it out of him. He said the van was parked 2 or 3 stalls from where he was. He went in and cashed his check, and then went back in his car and was counting his money when he saw a businesslike male white subject come up to Permon and talk to him. He said he was shaking his finger at him, and it appeared they were having some type of argument. Both men looked at him very hard and long, and he thought they might be doing harm to him or his automobile, so he wrote down the van plate number of Permon's, but he couldn't see the plate number of the car. He advised the subject was driving a fairly new-looking Chevrolet and said they talked for a few minutes. The subject got into the van with Permon, and he believed when they left the lot, they turned right, which would be eastbound, away from the Maysville Bridge. He left town and came back in July and saw posters about Permon's murder, and it bothered him so much that he came forward. He later claims his wife told him it was March of 1981, not 1982, that he saw him. So I'm unsure whether he got the wrong year, or he wanted to back out of the statement, or he was just lying.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of the last two, maybe. If he didn't know Permon was dead until he saw a poster, so we know he wasn't, a close friend, but maybe he made this comment, which some people do, to get attention or just to kind of get involved in a case, and maybe that's what he enjoyed that. Another thing is another eyewitness account that's wrong. 1981 or 1982, that's kind of vague.
Yeah, and I mean, if he actually wrote down Permon's license plate, now that's pretty compelling right there. But it's like, why would all of a sudden, oh, you got the wrong year? I mean, do you think he saw this a year earlier? Or was he just, nervous? Because like he said, these guys were staring him down. Or was it just completely made up?
Yeah, but why was he writing down Perm's license, his van number, and not the person that was intimidating Perm?
Yeah, if you think they're going to do something to you or your vehicle, you would leave, not sit and write down their license plate number.
Yeah, but I would be writing down the suspects, not the victim.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, there's just some miscellaneous things that were interesting. So, there's talk of 4 men in a van sighting, and I actually saw where it came from. A housekeeper at Brown County Hospital said that her son saw a van at a gas station in West Union, and he said there were 4 men in a van and one had a beard. Then police got an anonymous call that Permon's clothes were in a barn on a woman's property, and she let them search, but they found nothing. And then about half a mile from a residence on Isabel Road, they found a light purple jacket with the back ripped out. It was size 42 long and had been dropped over a fence. But we never really heard whether, I don't assume that was Permon's, and there was, no kind of work clothes or anything with it.
No, and was this the one that when they found the clothes, they found Vicodin?
No, there was some other clothing they found that certainly wasn't a work outfit, and they pretty much quickly found out that it wasn't Permon's clothes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't make this.
And I will say a few people just matter-of-factly stated that Permon had a girlfriend in Maysville. It didn't seem like much of a secret. One person said he was seeing a woman in Cincinnati. So this was really interesting because as far as we know, nothing that he was wearing has been found. But on May 23rd, there was a boy out bicycle riding on Half Acre Road, and he found a pair of boots, and in them was a pair of tube socks and a pair of white boxer shorts. He said the boots did not fit him, so he shared them with his 2 other friends named Dave and Mark, and he was presently trying to get them back. So I don't know whether he got them back, whether that could have actually been Permon's boots.
Yeah, I would think not. I mean, we know that in the police report there was no follow-up to that. We just don't see anything after that. So it would make me think that it wasn't, or
he never got him back from his friends. Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing that I don't know whether the police were annoyed, but it said they noted that Sergeant Frank Carrington is telling the entire family exactly what we have and everything else. And somehow Sergeant Carrington is related to Harold Garrett, which was Permon's brother-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
So as far as Vernon, there's a few more mentions. They talk about 2 subjects were in a bar talking about blank. They allegedly stated that they planned to kill in order to get blank back into the area and to pick him up at the funeral home. Apparently blank owed them a large sum of money. I'm assuming the blanks are all Vernon, but I'm not positive.
Yeah, I'm not positive either.
And the co-owner shared a few theories with the police. He said that it would take a big man to lift Permon out of the boot of a car. Permon had told him that blank and blank had flown over the house. He told them he could find it by air, but did not believe that he would be able to locate it on the ground. The co-owner stated that he was going into the area to see if he could find clothes. The police advised if by some chance he found them, to give them a call and they would pick them up.
Yeah, this co-owner, he was actually volunteering that information. I think it was a couple months after, it was sometime, I believe, in June or July, after Perm had died. He actually stopped by the police office and disclosed this information.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Joanne. And Joanne is a big part of the police file, believe it or not. So, and these were just like the phone calls that they would make to her and they would document them. So, just some background. She said that every once in a while, Permon would leave and just say that he was going to answer a call. She was surprised when it was mentioned that her and Permon were not getting along. She said she was always crazy about Permon and would do anything for him. She said that there were no marital problems since the birth of their youngest child, and said their personal life was very good. She said that Permon would go to a bar instead of fighting with her. And she did say that her and Permon had a fight about a year ago, and she threatened to leave because he was spending too much time with his work, but they decided to work it out.
Yeah, he was a workaholic.
Yeah, and she said they had no financial problems. They owned a blue van, a work van, a Winnebago, and Joanne had a car. And I believe she wanted to sell the plane and van so they could use the money for an in-ground pool.
Yeah, that in-ground pool was mentioned several times. You could tell they were really wanting that.
Yeah, and they asked Joanne about Permon being faithful, and she said she hoped that he was, but she could not swear to it. As far as what he was wearing, she said he did not always wear rings. He wore a Masonic ring and a wedding band, but he never wears his ring all the time. And it would have been unusual for him to leave without a wallet. They had 2 separate bank accounts. He had $327 in his. And as far as him asking about in the flower shop, he would only buy flowers once in a blue moon, and the last time was September of '81. She said he would go to the Gold Star restaurant in Mount Carmel 4 or 5 times a week. And she knows of no one that he would be running around with.
Yeah, and this is something that a lot of people had been questioning for a long time was, did Perm routinely buy flowers because he was at a flower shop, and why would he be there if he wasn't buying it for his wife? Yeah. And so here from the police file, we were able to get the answer, which is that, no, it wasn't something he routinely did. It had been the prior years since the last time he had purchased flowers. So if you take the Unsolved Mysteries account, oh, she knows what I want, she probably doesn't if it was in September of 1981, and we're now in May 1982.
Yeah. She said she was going to change her phone number in 3 or 4 days. She offered to sell this detective Gary Wise the plane. She wanted to sell it, move out of the area. She mentioned that there were some women that would give their eye teeth for Permon. She said that he always carried deodorant and he always kept himself very clean. And she kept talking about someone that she thought had a twin sister. Now, she has kind of a surprising theory. She theorized that her husband was assaulted and murdered for protecting his father, Giles. She felt they were trying to locate his residence in Bethel. She doesn't think that Permon was having an affair with blank. Rather, Giles Gilbert was. And they got a hold of Permon because he happened to be in the area. And she was concerned that it was being talked that Permon was a ladies' man, and she was really not trusting Detective Gary Wise. And so, yeah, you can just tell Joanne getting more and more agitated as these calls go on, and I can't blame her.
Yeah, she's at home. She has a lot of time to think, The police file mentions an account where it was believed, and maybe even Perm suspected, that his father was dating a new lady, and then on Mother's Day he was going to introduce this lady to the family, and But looking back at it and just rereading it now, none of this to me would make any sense.
Yeah. She also said that when she last talked to Blank, he told her that he knew that 2 of these police officers were going to Maysville. So she seemed concerned and more annoyed why they were going to Maysville. There was talk that this couple had been separated, had recently got back together. She talked about a man who used to live on Lake Lorelei who recently moved to the city of Hamersville. She's also going to try to talk to Vernon and ask him why he didn't come to the funeral. She felt that there was an hour and a half there from the time he left Maysville to when his van was found. And they noted that Joanne gives them a little bit more information each time she calls.
Yeah. And in the beginning, they weren't even recording her calls, but
yeah,
they eventually got to a point where they're like, okay, this is getting more and more bizarre. Let's start recording.
Yeah, so this next part, this was the part that shocked me the most in this entire police file. So, October 27th, Joanne called to let off some steam. She says on the Saturday that Permon went missing, she was traveling in her auto westbound by 125 by Spring Grove Avenue at about 5 or 6 p.m. that day. Going eastbound was a van that looked identical to theirs, so Permon, and she told him she could have sworn that Permon was driving the van by himself. She said that she did not see the CB antenna on it, but she was sure that it was him. She was mad and didn't wave, and he didn't wave at her. She'd never told us before because she felt at the time that it wasn't important. Talk about a bombshell.
That's important. You're talking about seeing him at 5 p.m., 6 p.m. the day. Yeah, there's a lot to dissect there.
And I don't know whether, Unsolved Mysteries could do editing, but she made it sound like she sat there all night. She didn't want to get her smallest in the car. And I think she was mad. He didn't come home when he said. Maybe she was suspicious of what he was up to. So she takes off in her car to try to find him. And she basically does.
And being mad is a weird reaction to have. If you should be more concerned because you're at a time where there's no cell phones, the rural roads, and as Joanne, if she's sitting at home waiting on her husband, she has to be thinking, okay, was he in an accident? Did his car break down? So when you see him that day at 5 p.m. driving by, you probably should give him the benefit of the doubt that something had happened before you automatically just get angry. So to me, that tells me that either maybe she was sometimes, a little upset at him for things, or that maybe there was something that she knew.
Well, yeah, if everyone around town thinks he's got a girlfriend in Maysville, I mean, of course she's heard things, whether she'll admit to him. But to me, that just makes me think she had more suspicions about, possible infidelity than she mentioned.
Yeah.
And then she also complained that a reporter named McLeod from the newspaper is trying to get interviews with friends and family and to talk to Blank to get a release. There was a girl in Bethel that was supposedly keeping a record of some sort on the activities. She has a very low opinion of Blank and feels that she is capable of quite anything and was trying to make a play for her husband while he was alive. Police are going to start recording Joanne's phone calls.
Yep.
So the next call was a threat. She called dispatch and threatened the police officers to call her immediately or she would tell the news media exactly everything she knows about the murder investigation.
And this was 20 days after she had called to report
about seeing him. Yeah.
Yes.
She claimed that she was upset because they had been holding all the case information away from her. She was mad about what she thought were discrepancies in the pathology report, sick and tired of the police baiting her and asking her questions to see what her facial reaction. Getting tired of the police accusing her of murdering her husband, they told her they never accused her of murder. She told them she would never talk to them again. They went to her residence, calmed her down, talked to her in person for an hour, and she finally apologized for being upset and advised that she understood what we were doing and how. And she said she felt that someone may have had a grudge against Permon in reference to the operation at GE. They didn't know whether it was an assumption on Joanne's part or whether Agent O'Rourke had made any statements to her, but Blank referred to me as Permon having an involvement in a gambling operation. She also said that a week or two before his death that Permon wanted to sell the Winnebago, but he wouldn't tell her why. She figured he must have owed money somewhere. So wow, talk about a fourth theory right there.
Yeah, and let's back up a little and talk about her view of the autopsy. Because on my side of the research, I was looking at this doctor that actually did, and I'm not going to mention his name, but from what I learned, it looks like he was a brand new, like maybe he had just graduated college a year or medical school a year before. So maybe that could be a reason why she was questioning it, and I have some questions about some things too. But when we're talking about the pathology, she was specific to question his actual toxicology report, which makes me question whether or not he was drinking or they found alcohol in his system, and she did not agree.
And it was redacted, but the only thing it told us was she was upset because they talked about his teeth was unremarkable, and she's like, well, he has dentures. You know, maybe they just missed that, she said. But
so she is looking hard and trying to find, where they've made mistakes.
But this fourth theory, of course, Unsolved Mysteries didn't mention it, but there was a GE, some kind of a gambling operation supposedly going on. And here he just wanted to sell something 2 weeks before he was murdered, but he wouldn't tell her why. And she even says she figured he owed money to someone.
Yeah, which is weird that she wouldn't know that she would never ask that question. I mean, I know they have two bank accounts, but that doesn't make sense.
And see, he would have had to tell her if he sold the Winnebago, but she must have asked him why, and he just wouldn't say. Yeah. Okay, so now a little bit about Maysville. Anne Breeze, she was interviewed on this segment from Clyde's. She said that Permon purchased 5 cartons of cigarettes and went into Carol Jean's flower shop. She did not know why. And Joanne did say that Permon always ate at Malone's restaurant in Maysville. Uh-huh. And Detective Wise interviewed, I believe, somebody at Clyde's or the flower shop. And this is very interesting. This person was sure that Permon was in her store sometime Saturday evening, which means he may have went back because the Unsolved Mysteries segment, I think he said he was going to come back when this person was working.
He does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, maybe he actually did. So, 2 of the police officers, Schramm and then Wise, went to Maysville to the Mason County Courthouse for the purpose of securing court records on divorce and additional properties owned by blank and blank. They found no divorce, but did find additional properties owned by them, and they also got permission to search blank. Detective Dave Jones, Maysville PD, said he conducted a background check on blank and found that while in school had a very violent temper and would get even no matter how long it would take. And then noteworthy, the next 7 pages of the police file are redacted.
Uh-huh. All about the Maysville.
Yeah, and so then someone talks about a group of houses on 3rd Street in Maysville. They talk about a pickup truck. Since July or August, she noticed that someone in the area had done something to this pickup truck, and it was different looking. She said it was an open bed type of truck, and she knew he was working on it and did something to it, but she couldn't figure out what was different. Police had already observed this person in this truck, and they think that he put a brand new bed on it by using treated 2x4s. And then they said blank drove herself back and forth to work. We discovered that blank works day shift at blank. I think if he discovered from her that he was working there to save up for a divorce, he would have not allowed her to go to work at blank. Whether or not he knew that blank was the boyfriend is unknown. It will have to be checked into further. So that brings us to the most interesting part, and there are a couple of possible persons of interest. They haven't been officially named that, but police are certainly interested. And this has never been made, public to the extent that we're going to. And we do know this couple's name, but we're not going to mention it. We don't want to hurt any kind of investigation. But they are a married couple. They're still alive and they're still married. And they would be in their 70s. And they did live at Maysville at the time. And they no longer live there, but we do believe they're still somewhere in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
So some people think that this couple actually interacted socially with Permon and Joanne, which would be very interesting. We're just not positive about that.
Yeah.
And
I was told that from one source that they socialized together.
yeah,
but it was, an anonymous source.
yeah. There was talk about this couple possibly having marital problems around 1982, possibly even a separation, but they always denied it. And then someone contacted us, and we won't reveal who, but she said that she worked at KFC, and she was questioned 1 year after the murder. So Clint, you spoke to her, so tell us what kind of questions she was asked.
So this was a year after the murder. She remembers it being the FBI. I don't know for sure that the FBI was involved in this part of the investigation, but the questions that they were asking were whether or not she had seen this van at her work, because there was a coworker that she had that she believed used to work at a flower shop.
And that's the female of the couple we're talking about.
Yes.
Yes.
And the investigation was focused on the connection this female lady had to Perm, and whether or not they were driving around on breaks, but whatever the line of questions, the van, or more specifically the back of the van, those were kind of areas that the police were focused on.
And they wanted to know if he'd ever pulled up or dropped her off, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's very interesting.
And she had no recollection of it. She said, it had been a year, but those are the questions that she remembers 40-something years later.
Yeah, wow. So there's also a street where this couple lived at the time. It's referenced in the police file. People have told us about it, and I actually believe one of the pictures we were sent is their house.
Yeah.
Now that I looked at it recently. So we won't give specifics, but we will say someone told us that police have recently even done some work on this case. So it's good to know that they haven't forgotten about his murder.
Mm-hmm. No, so one thing that's interesting when we talk about, on the earlier point, we're talking about Maysville, that the police term group of houses was mentioned to them. That terminology has came up a couple times, just talking to people local to the area about the suspect, because it appears they really had a group of houses.
Yes. Yeah, and it was pretty unique. I mean, we looked it on Google Earth, we checked it out. But so, Clint, is there anything else in the police report that we haven't covered that you want to talk about that you can think of?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything.
Yeah, we've definitely given people the bare bones of the police report, and kind of left out stuff that we don't think is relevant. But thank you so much again for your help with the research. And you and I have one more podcast together in a couple weeks, and it may even be related to this. Who knows? But it's not far away, the case. So.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Clermont County also sent us several photos. I will put some of them on the Permon Facebook page, my Lost and Found blog's Instagram, and on the article on my website page. They are of where Permon was found, and also inside and outside photos of the van. Some pictures, honestly, we aren't sure what they are of. They also sent us a picture of a woman whose face they've blurred out, a dark pickup truck, and a picture of two houses close together. We believe that these three mystery pictures may be related to the couple that we just talked about. I still feel like there was something going on that we just don't know about. We don't know how much involvement, if any, that Permon had with the people who were drug trafficking in the area. We don't know exactly who would have a motive to want to get Vernon through his brother, or why, and if they would have made such an extreme move. The affair theory seems to hold more weight now, in my opinion. It is no longer just a general theory of a possible affair, but some more specific details of two people who could be involved. We have now also been able to confirm that the woman in the mystery couple did in fact work at Carol Jean's Flowers. In addition to the main three theories we talked about last time, now we have one more to consider. The police file mentioned an alleged gambling ring at GE around the time of Permon's death. Considering that Permon wanted to sell the Winnebago shortly before he was murdered, but wouldn't tell his wife why, could point to his need for quick money for a gambling debt, or perhaps another problem that we don't know about. Permon Gilbert's murder is still cloaked in so much mystery. There were 3 initial theories, and almost 44 years later, they could all still be possible. It appears that there were even more things going on in Permon's life, whether they be secret or just not known to the public, than we knew. Could they have contributed to his brutal death? With the large amount of the police report being made accessible to us, and us sharing it with you, hopefully this podcast will be heard by people who have more information. Please contact us through the Permon Gilbert What Happened to Me in 1982 Facebook page or Lost and Found Podcast at Yahoo. Also, you can contact Claremont County Sheriff's Office. If the right people will come forward, then perhaps we will finally know whether Permon Gilbert's death was more retribution or rendezvous. Permon's case in itself is baffling enough, but what if I told you that just 2 months before Permon was murdered, a man around the same age went missing from the exact same county where Permon's body was found? It has been 44 years and this man is still missing. We'll talk about his case next time, as well as another man who also went missing just a few weeks earlier and just a few hours away. Could these 3 cases, all relatively close together in Ohio, within a span of just 3 months, be related? That concludes part 2 of my podcast on Permon Gilbert. Once again, a special thanks to my friend Clint for helping me with the research and joining me to discuss the police file. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave me a rating or review where you listen to your podcasts. You can find me on Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and YouTube Music. You can find links to my most recent podcast, as well as all of my original articles, on my website at Lost and Found Blogs. I have social media pages under my blog on Facebook, X, and Twitter. You can also reach me via email at lostandfoundpodcast@yahoo. And remember that cold cases stay cold because their story stops getting told.